"Take her away," the Alpha King said, his voice so calm that it silenced more than 300 nobles without the need to shout. "I will never marry a woman I have never chosen." The words settled over Blackwood Palace like the first frost of winter, cold enough to stop every whispered conversation beneath the towering crystal chandeliers. No one seemed surprised. Ethan Blackwood had rejected every arranged alliance presented to him since claiming the throne 7 years earlier. Princesses from neighboring kingdoms had returned home with untouched engagement rings. Daughters of the wealthiest alpha families had spent fortunes preparing for introductions that ended before they truly began. Throughout the Northern Territories, everyone knew one thing about their king. Ethan trusted loyalty that was earned, never loyalty that was negotiated. Marriage, in his eyes, belonged to the heart, not to politics. Yet this morning felt different. High above the royal hall, carved into the marble arch behind the moon throne, an ancient relief depicted a veiled woman standing before the first Alpha Kings. Most visitors never looked at it twice. It had become part of the palace, another forgotten decoration worn smooth by centuries. Only the oldest elders still remembered the faded inscription beneath the carving. "When the veiled light returns, pride shall kneel before truth." High Elder Alden glanced toward the ancient relief before lowering his eyes again, a quiet uneasiness settling in his chest. He had read those words hundreds of times during his life, but never had they echoed in his thoughts with such unsettling clarity. The enormous oak doors opened slowly. Every conversation disappeared. A young woman entered alone, dressed in a simple white bridal gown without jewels, without servants, without any sign of royal grandeur. A delicate veil concealed her face, allowing only a glimpse of pale skin and strands of soft chestnut hair illuminated by the morning sun filtering through stained glass windows. Claire Whitmore walked with measured grace across nearly 100 feet of polished marble, her footsteps steady despite hundreds of curious eyes following her every movement. She neither hurried nor hesitated. Along the edges of the throne room, whispers quickly returned. "She looks like a village girl. The council could not find anyone better. She will be gone before noon." Lady Beatrice Ashcroft, daughter of one of the wealthiest noble houses, allowed herself a quiet smile before speaking just loudly enough for those around her to hear. "Someone should spare the poor girl the embarrassment and send her home now." Several young noblewomen laughed softly behind embroidered fans. Claire heard every word. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the fabric of her gown before relaxing again. Her grandmother had once told her that dignity was often tested long before it was recognized. So she kept walking. Lord Cedric Ravencrest stepped forward and bowed respectfully toward Ethan. "Your Majesty," he said, "if this alliance does not please you, there are other noble families prepared to offer daughters worthy of your throne." Several council members quietly nodded in agreement. Ethan never looked away from the veiled bride. "This is not about finding another bride," he answered. "It is about refusing the idea that any woman should become a prize exchanged between powerful families." Claire finally reached the center of the royal hall and stopped beneath the beam of morning light spilling through the great dome above. She lowered her head respectfully, but said nothing. The silence that followed seemed almost louder than the whispers before it. Ethan studied the motionless figure before him. He expected fear. He expected disappointment. Perhaps even tears. Instead, the woman beneath the veil stood with remarkable calm, as though she had entered the palace expecting rejection rather than celebration. Something about that quiet confidence unsettled him. Before he could speak again, High Elder Alden noticed a single shaft of sunlight drift across the ancient relief behind the throne, illuminating only the carved face of the forgotten veiled woman while the rest of the wall remained in shadow. A chill ran through the old man's spine. For reasons he could not explain, he found himself silently praying that the forgotten inscription carved beneath the relief would remain nothing more than an old legend. Claire Whitmore stopped beneath the shaft of morning light without lifting her head, her white veil hiding every expression while the enormous throne room measured her worth before hearing a single word. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before Lady Beatrice Ashcroft stepped gracefully from the front row of nobles, the jewels around her neck catching the sunlight as brightly as the confidence in her smile. She offered Ethan a flawless curtsy before turning toward the veiled bride. There is still time to spare everyone unnecessary embarrassment, she said sweetly. If you leave now, history will remember today as a misunderstanding instead of a humiliation. Several noble women nodded in quiet agreement. A few exchanged sympathetic looks that carried more pity than kindness. Claire remained perfectly still. She had heard similar voices throughout her life, people deciding who she was before asking her name. Her grandmother had always warned her that pride often disguised itself as concern, so she simply folded her hands together and waited. Lord Cedric Ravencrest stepped beside Lady Beatrice, his expression thoughtful rather than cruel. "Young lady," he said evenly, "no one wishes to disgrace you. The Alpha King has spoken clearly. Accept his generosity and return home with honor before this gathering becomes painful for everyone involved." His words sounded reasonable enough that several council members quietly murmured their approval. Ethan watched the exchange without interruption. Part of him expected the mysterious bride to defend herself, to plead her case, or to demand the ceremony continue. Instead, she stood in complete silence, her composure somehow making the whispers around her grow even louder. "Does she not even intend to speak?" one noble asked. "Perhaps she knows there is nothing she can say," another answered. Claire slowly lifted her chin beneath the veil. "May I ask one question?" she said softly. Her calm voice carried effortlessly through the hall, causing every conversation to stop at once. Ethan nodded once. "You may." Claire turned toward Lord Cedric. "First, if I leave today, will the next woman brought before the throne truly arrive by her own choice?" The older Alpha hesitated. For the first time that morning, he found himself without an immediate answer. Claire then looked toward Lady Beatrice. "And if another bride is chosen after me, will people judge her more kindly than they have judged me?" Lady Beatrice's smile faded slightly. Again, no answer came. Claire lowered her head once more. "Then leaving changes nothing." The simple words drifted through the throne room with unexpected weight. Ethan felt something shift inside him. She had not defended herself. She had defended every woman who might stand where she stood today. That realization unsettled him more than anger ever could. Before anyone could respond, a young noble laughed from the back of the chamber. Perhaps she believes silence makes her wise. Several others joined him, though their laughter sounded uncertain rather than confident. Ethan glanced toward them only once. The laughter disappeared immediately. He had not spoken a word, yet the authority in his gaze alone restored complete silence. "Enough," he said calmly. "No guest in this palace will be mocked while standing under my protection." Claire looked up in quiet surprise. It was the first time Ethan had defended her, even if only through a single sentence. Lady Beatrice stepped back without another word, recognizing that the mood inside the court had begun to change in ways she could not explain. High Elder Alden continued watching the ancient relief behind the throne. The sunlight now illuminated more than the carved face of the veiled woman. Tiny silver lines hidden within the stone had begun to shimmer almost invisibly, forming patterns that no one had seen in generations. A quiet uneasiness settled deeper into his heart. He remembered an old passage preserved in the royal archives, one almost every scholar dismissed as myth. It warned that when the forgotten symbols awakened, the kingdom would be tested not by strength, but by the humility to recognize truth before it revealed itself. Alden slowly tightened his grip on his silver staff, silently wondering whether that moment had already begun. The uneasy silence lingered long after Claire's gentle words faded into the vast chamber. No one rushed to speak. Even those who had mocked her only moments earlier now found themselves avoiding her hidden gaze. Ethan remained standing before the moon throne, studying the woman whose quiet courage had disrupted the certainty of an entire royal court. She had not defended her own honor. She had questioned the tradition itself, and somehow she had done so without accusation or resentment. That was what unsettled him most. High Elder Alden slowly stepped away from the throne, his silver staff tapping softly against the marble floor. "Your Majesty," he said with unusual restraint, "before any final decision is made, I respectfully ask permission to complete the ancient observance." Ethan frowned slightly. The observance was abandoned generations ago. Alden inclined his head. "So we believed." Lord Cedric immediately objected. "High Elder, with respect, forgotten rituals belong in history books, not in matters of state." Several council members quickly voiced their agreement. We cannot delay royal decisions because of old legends. The kingdom needs certainty, not superstition. Alden listened without argument. Instead, he quietly raised his eyes toward the weathered relief carved high above the throne. Then explain why the moon relief has awakened for the first time in over 400 years. Every face instinctively turned toward the ancient stone carving. What had appeared moments earlier as little more than shifting sunlight had now become unmistakable. Thin silver veins hidden within the marble spread gently across the carved image of the veiled woman, glowing with a soft radiance that no candle or window could produce. A ripple of uneasy whispers moved through the hall. One elderly noble crossed his arms tightly. Another instinctively touched the small silver wolf pendant hanging beneath his coat. Ethan narrowed his eyes. He had passed beneath that carving thousands of times since childhood. Never once had he seen it change. Perhaps the stone simply reflects the morning light differently, Lord Cedric suggested, though his voice carried less confidence than before. Before Alden could answer, a deep metallic tone echoed through the palace. It came from somewhere far above the throne room. Once, clear, resonant. Every conversation stopped instantly. Ethan looked toward the vaulted ceiling. What was that? A young palace guard hurried through the open doors, breathing hard from climbing the spiral towers. He stopped several feet from the throne before lowering himself respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said, still catching his breath. "The ancient moon bell has rung." Complete silence swept through the court. Ethan's expression hardened. "Who ordered it?" "No one, Your Majesty." The guard swallowed carefully. "The bellkeeper is still at the tower. He swears no one touched the ropes." Lord Cedric immediately shook his head. "Impossible. That bell has not sounded on its own since." His voice slowly disappeared. No one finished the sentence because everyone present knew how the old story ended. Claire felt a gentle warmth spread through her fingertips once again. It was the same quiet feeling she had experienced as a child whenever her grandmother spoke beneath the evening sky. Without thinking, she lightly touched the edge of her veil. She had no intention of removing it. Somehow she knew the choice was not hers to make. Ethan noticed the small movement immediately. At that exact moment, something deep within him stirred once more. His wolf, disciplined through years of absolute control, rose quietly inside his spirit. There was no warning, no aggression, no instinct to challenge. Instead, it became intensely alert, as though recognizing a familiar presence hidden just beyond sight. Ethan drew a slow breath, silently willing the sensation to disappear. It refused. The invisible pull only grew stronger. High Elder Alden watched both of them carefully, his heartbeat quickening with every passing second. The bell, the glowing relief, the impossible calm surrounding the veiled bride. One sign alone could be dismissed as coincidence. Three could not. Then, as another ray of morning sunlight poured through the stained glass dome, a gentle breeze slipped into the throne room from the highest windows, circling silently through the marble hall until it came to rest around Claire, causing the delicate edges of her white veil to flutter ever so slightly, while every person present held their breath. The delicate edge of Claire's veil fluttered gently in the unexpected breeze, yet she did not reach to steady it. She stood exactly where she had stopped, her breathing calm, her hands resting quietly before her. Around her, the air itself seemed strangely alive. The flickering torchlight along the stone walls leaned toward the center of the throne room, as though responding to an invisible current that no one else could feel. Ethan noticed it immediately. His sharp eyes swept across the hall, searching for an open window or some ordinary explanation, but nothing appeared out of place. Even more unsettling was the silence inside him. The restless tension that had followed him since dawn had disappeared completely. His wolf no longer paced with suspicion. It stood still, focused entirely on the veiled woman before him. Never in his life had his instincts become so calm in the presence of a stranger. High Elder Alden slowly stepped forward, his weathered face growing paler with every passing moment. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I ask one thing of you." Ethan looked toward him. "Speak. Whatever happens next, please do not interrupt it." Lord Cedric immediately frowned. "High Elder, you cannot seriously believe we should surrender this court to an old prophecy." Alden turned toward him. "I believe we should avoid standing in the path of something we do not yet understand." Lady Beatrice folded her arms tightly. Or perhaps we are allowing coincidence to become theater. Her words earned several quiet nods from younger nobles eager to believe reason still governed the morning. Claire heard every objection but remained silent. She remembered another lesson from her grandmother. There would come a day when people demanded explanations she would not yet possess. On that day, she was never to invent answers simply to satisfy their fears. Truth would arrive in its own time. Ethan studied Claire again, searching for any sign that she had orchestrated what was happening around them. Yet there was no satisfaction in her posture, no secret confidence, no hint that she expected the extraordinary events unfolding before the court. If anything, she appeared as uncertain as everyone else. That realization unsettled him even more deeply. Before another word could be spoken, the ancient moon bell echoed once again. This time it rang twice. The deep tones rolled across Blackwood Palace before fading into the mountain air beyond the stained glass windows. A second palace guard hurried into the hall, stopping beside the first. "Your Majesty," he reported, "every bell-keeper has searched the tower. The ropes remain untouched." Uneasy whispers spread through the court. Several elders quietly exchanged worried glances. Alden slowly closed his eyes. 2 rings. The forgotten records had spoken of 2 calls before the veil of truth was lifted. His heartbeat quickened as memories from ancient manuscripts returned with startling clarity. Earlier that morning, when the first bell had sounded, he had secretly dispatched a messenger to the royal archives with instructions to retrieve every surviving volume concerning the ancient covenant. If those books still existed, they would soon arrive. Ethan took one slow step toward Claire. The distance between them had become surprisingly small. He expected his wolf to challenge the closeness. Instead, the powerful instinct within him responded with unmistakable peace. He had never trusted destiny. He trusted choices, discipline, and reason. Yet standing only a few feet away from the quiet woman beneath the white veil, reason alone no longer explained what he felt. Claire slowly raised her eyes beneath the delicate fabric, sensing his presence without fully seeing his face. Neither of them spoke. Neither needed to. The invisible current surrounding them seemed to grow stronger with every heartbeat. Then, high above the throne room, the morning clouds parted completely. A brilliant shaft of golden sunlight poured through the great stained glass dome, striking the ancient relief before cascading downward until it rested entirely upon Claire. The warmth carried by that light was unlike ordinary sunshine. It felt gentle, welcoming, almost familiar. The breeze returned once more, circling around her in quiet spirals. This time it caught the silver clasp securing her veil, and with a soft metallic click that echoed through the silent hall, the tiny fastening slipped free. The tiny silver clasp struck the marble floor with a sound so soft that no one should have noticed it. Yet every head in the throne room turned toward Claire at the exact same moment. For a single heartbeat, nothing happened. The delicate veil rested lightly upon her shoulders, held in place only by the stillness of the morning air. Then the gentle breeze returned. It circled around her one final time before lifting the fine white fabric as effortlessly as autumn leaves carried across a quiet lake. No hand reached for it. No servant stepped forward. The veil simply rose into the beam of golden sunlight, drifting slowly across the royal hall until it settled silently upon the polished marble several feet away. Claire Whitmore stood before the court with her face revealed at last. The room became utterly still. She wore no jeweled crown. No royal ornaments shimmered against her gown. Her beauty did not overwhelm because of extravagance. It was the quiet confidence in her gentle blue eyes, the calm grace in her expression, and the kindness that remained untouched despite every whisper she had endured that transformed the atmosphere around her. Lady Beatrice lowered her embroidered fan without realizing she had done so. Lord Cedric forgot the argument he had been preparing. Even the palace guards standing motionless along the walls found themselves staring in silent disbelief. Ethan Blackwood looked at Claire as though seeing the morning itself for the first time. The suspicion he had carried since dawn dissolved without resistance. She was nothing like the ambitious noblewoman he had imagined. There was no triumph in her eyes for proving the court wrong. No satisfaction that destiny seemed to favor her. Instead, she looked almost concerned by the attention surrounding her. That simple humility reached Ethan more deeply than any declaration ever could. Before anyone spoke, a faint silver light appeared beneath the neckline of Claire's gown. At first it resembled nothing more than sunlight reflecting against delicate fabric. Then the glow slowly strengthened. An elegant crescent-shaped symbol emerged beneath her collarbone, surrounded by graceful silver patterns that shimmered like moonlight dancing across still water. The mark pulsed gently, not with power that demanded fear, but with warmth that invited peace. A collective breath swept through the hall. High Elder Alden's silver staff slipped from his trembling hands and struck the marble floor with a clear metallic echo. His eyes widened as tears gathered along their edges. "The moon seal," he whispered, scarcely believing his own voice. After all these centuries, Claire instinctively looked down at the glowing mark, her own surprise unmistakable. She touched it lightly with her fingertips. "My grandmother," she murmured softly. "She always told me there would come a day when the truth would no longer need to hide." The words had barely left her lips when another impossible sign appeared. The enormous statue of the Moon Guardian standing beside the throne released a gentle cascade of shimmering silver dust that floated through the air like tiny stars. The ancient crystal eyes carved into the stone wolf reflected the morning sunlight with renewed brilliance, and at the same moment, the centuries-old royal crown resting upon its crimson velvet cushion trembled ever so slightly before lifting less than an inch into the air. No one moved. No one breathed. The crown remained suspended for only a moment before settling quietly back into its place, as though acknowledging someone it had awaited across generations. Ethan felt his wolf lower its head inside him with complete certainty. There was no struggle, no command, only recognition older than memory itself. High Elder Alden slowly fell to one knee, overcome not by obligation, but by reverence. One by one, the eldest members of the council followed him. Their voices remained silent, yet their lowered heads spoke more clearly than any proclamation ever could. Claire looked at them with quiet astonishment, taking an instinctive step backward. "Please," she said gently, emotion softening her voice, "you do not need to kneel before me." Alden slowly lifted his eyes, his expression filled with both humility and wonder. "My lady," he said, "we are not kneeling before power. We are kneeling before a promise our ancestors made, and a promise that has finally returned home." Claire instinctively took another small step backward, her hand still resting lightly over the glowing moon seal, as though she hoped the silver light might quietly disappear. Nothing in her life had prepared her for an entire royal court lowering their heads before her. She had grown up in a modest countryside estate where respect was earned through kindness, not titles. "There must be some mistake," she said softly. "I have never claimed to be anyone important." High Elder Alden slowly rose to his feet, though his posture remained deeply respectful. His eyes never left the radiant crescent beneath Claire's collarbone. "That is precisely why there is no mistake," he answered gently. "Those who chase greatness rarely deserve it. Those chosen by the covenant have never sought it." Ethan watched the exchange in complete silence. Earlier that morning he had believed destiny was merely a comforting story invented by people afraid to make difficult choices. Yet everything before him challenged that belief. Claire had never demanded recognition. She had never attempted to impress the court. Even now, when the ancient signs seemed to point toward her alone, she looked more concerned than triumphant. That humility carried a quiet strength Ethan had never encountered before. The heavy doors at the far end of the throne room suddenly opened once again. An elderly royal archivist entered with two assistants carrying an enormous leather-bound volume protected inside a polished oak case. Earlier that morning, immediately after the first mysterious toll of the moon bell, High Elder Alden had quietly ordered every surviving record concerning the Forgotten Covenant to be retrieved from the deepest chamber of the royal archives. The old scholar stopped before the council, carefully placed the ancient book upon a stone table, and slowly opened its weathered pages with hands that trembled from equal parts age and anticipation. Dust shimmered in the sunlight as parchment untouched for generations finally met the morning air again. "We found it," the archivist whispered. "The last chronicle of the Lunar Sovereigns." Every elder leaned closer. Across two faded pages stretched an illuminated illustration painted centuries before the founding of Blackwood Palace. It showed a young woman standing beneath a flowing white veil, a silver crescent glowing beneath her collarbone, while the first Alpha Kings stood before her with their heads respectfully lowered. Claire stared at the portrait, her breath catching as though she were looking into a forgotten mirror. Even the simple embroidery around the woman's sleeves closely resembled the gown Claire wore that morning. The archivist carefully turned one brittle page. Beneath the illustration appeared elegant silver script preserved in the oldest language of the Northern Territories. High Elder Alden read the passage slowly, allowing every word to settle over the silent hall. The Lunar Sovereign shall not inherit a throne through blood alone, nor claim authority through ambition. She shall be known by her mercy before her name, by her humility before her crown, and by the light that reveals itself only when hearts are willing to see. No one spoke after the final sentence. Lady Beatrice quietly lowered her eyes, remembering every careless word she had spoken earlier that morning. Lord Cedric removed the ceremonial chain from around his neck and held it respectfully against his heart, recognizing that centuries of forgotten tradition had quietly returned before his very eyes. Ethan looked from the ancient manuscript back to Claire. For the first time in many years, certainty abandoned him completely. Every judgment he had formed before meeting her now seemed painfully incomplete. He realized he knew almost nothing about the woman standing before him, except one undeniable truth. Every extraordinary sign revealed that morning had followed her, yet she remained exactly the same kind, composed young woman who had entered the palace without demanding anything from anyone. The silver glow around the moon seal gradually softened until it resembled the quiet light of a full moon rising above distant mountains. Then, without warning, every alpha present felt the same gentle stirring within their wolves. It was not a command. It was not fear. It was an ancient memory awakening after centuries of silence, reminding them of a promise carried through generations that no history book had ever truly erased. The invisible wave passed through the throne room as gently as moonlight spreading across a quiet lake. Every alpha felt it differently, yet none could deny it. Some remembered stories told by grandparents they had long dismissed as bedtime tales. Others experienced only an overwhelming sense of peace that settled deep within their hearts. Ethan felt something even more profound. The powerful wolf that had obeyed every command throughout his life slowly lowered its head within his spirit, not in surrender born of weakness, but in reverence freely given. He had spent years mastering his instincts. This was the first time they had taught him something his mind had not yet understood. Lord Cedric straightened his shoulders, determined to resist what emotion threatened to accomplish. "No," he said firmly, more to himself than to anyone else. "Respect belongs to the throne. Traditions cannot simply return because of a glowing mark in an old manuscript." Several younger alphas looked toward him with relief, grateful that someone had finally spoken the doubts lingering in their own minds. High Elder Alden did not argue. Instead, he quietly watched Lord Cedric's face. "Then listen," the elder replied softly. "Not to me, but to the wolf that has guided your family for generations." Cedric frowned. "My wolf answers only to my own will." Yet even as he spoke those words, he felt the familiar presence within him step forward with unusual calm. It did not challenge him. It did not overpower him. Instead, it simply recognized the quiet light surrounding Claire. Cedric closed his eyes for only a moment, hoping the sensation would fade. It did not. The peaceful certainty only grew stronger, dissolving the pride that had clouded his judgment since. Morning. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he opened his eyes again. He looked toward Claire, expecting to find triumph waiting for him. Instead, he found concern. She looked almost distressed that the court stood divided because of her. That single expression shattered the last of his resistance. Without a word, Lord Cedric placed one hand over his heart and slowly lowered his head in respectful acknowledgement. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, yet it changed everything. One by one, the remaining alpha nobles who had still hesitated quietly followed his example. No command was given. No elder instructed them to kneel. No mysterious force compelled obedience. Each made the choice willingly, guided by something far older than law. Lady Beatrice watched the remarkable transformation unfold before her. Earlier that morning, she had measured Claire by the simplicity of her dress and the veil hiding her face. Now she realized she had never truly looked at the woman herself. She stepped forward with quiet humility. "Lady Claire," she said softly, "I judged you before I knew you. I hope one day you will forgive my pride." Claire immediately shook her head with gentle kindness. "There is nothing to forgive. We all see more clearly after we have learned something new." Ethan listened to every word. The answer touched him more deeply than he expected. She had every reason to expose those who had mocked her. Instead, she offered them grace without hesitation. In that moment, Ethan understood why every ancient record described mercy before authority. Real leadership did not begin with power. It began with compassion. The throne room remained wrapped in peaceful silence as Ethan slowly walked forward. Every eye followed him. The Alpha King stopped only a few feet from Claire. Their eyes met without fear, without expectation, and without the barriers that had separated them only an hour earlier. Ethan drew one slow breath, then placed his right hand over his heart exactly as the first Alpha Kings had done in the ancient illustration. He lowered his head with complete sincerity. The court watched in breathless silence as the most powerful Alpha in the Northern Territories chose humility over pride. At that exact moment, the moon seal upon Claire's collarbone glowed once more, brighter than ever before, while the ancient crown beside the moon throne released a soft silver radiance that filled the entire hall with quiet warmth, as though the forgotten covenant itself had finally witnessed the moment it had been waiting centuries to see. The gentle silver light slowly faded until only the quiet glow of the moon seal remained beneath Claire's collarbone. No one hurried to speak. The throne room had witnessed something none of them expected to see during their lifetime, and every noble seemed reluctant to break the peaceful silence that now filled Blackwood Palace. Ethan remained with his head lowered for another brief moment before straightening once more. When he looked at Claire again, there was no trace of the distant king who had rejected an arranged marriage only an hour earlier. The pride that had once guarded every decision he made had given way to something far more difficult for any ruler to possess: humility. He took one slow step forward, leaving only a respectful distance between them. "Claire Whitmore," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the silent hall without effort. "This morning I believed you had been sent here to take away my freedom to choose my own future." Claire listened without interrupting. Ethan continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I was wrong." The simple admission settled over the court with unexpected weight. Kings rarely confessed mistakes, especially before hundreds of witnesses. Yet no one saw weakness in his words. They saw honesty. Ethan drew a slow breath before speaking again. "I spent years refusing every arranged marriage because I believed no woman should become a bargaining piece for powerful families. I thought rejecting those unions protected both my freedom and theirs." He glanced briefly around the court before returning his attention to Claire. "Today you showed me something I failed to understand. Refusing tradition is not enough if I never take the time to understand the person standing before me." Claire felt genuine emotion rise within her heart. She had expected resistance from the Alpha King. She had never expected such sincere reflection. "You owe me no apology," she answered gently. "Neither of us chose how this morning began." Ethan smiled faintly. "Perhaps not, but I can choose how it ends." A quiet murmur passed through the gathered nobles before disappearing once again. Ethan slowly removed the ceremonial ring that symbolized the authority of the Alpha King. Rather than placing it upon Claire's hand or making any grand gesture, he simply held it in his open palm before closing his fingers around it again. "This ring has reminded me for years that every choice I make affects thousands of lives," he said. "Today it reminds me of something else. Authority does not give me the right to decide another person's future." He lifted his eyes to meet Claire's. "The council arranged this marriage without asking either of us. Destiny revealed truths neither of us expected. But neither tradition nor prophecy can make the decision that belongs only to two people." The warmth in the throne room seemed to deepen as morning sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, surrounding them with quiet golden light. Ethan slowly extended his hand toward Claire once more, keeping enough distance to make it clear that accepting it was entirely her decision. "I am no longer asking because the council commands it," he said softly. "I am not asking because of ancient covenants or forgotten prophecies." His expression remained calm, open, and sincere. I am asking because I have seen your kindness when others offered judgment, your dignity when others offered humiliation, and your humility when others offered reverence. Those are the qualities I would willingly spend a lifetime learning from. Claire looked at the hand extended before her, then back into Ethan's eyes. She searched for obligation and found none. She searched for pride and found none. She searched for the king who had dismissed her at the palace doors and realized he was no longer standing before her. In his place stood a man willing to place choice above power. A gentle smile slowly appeared across her face. Trust is not built in a single morning, she said softly. It grows through countless ordinary days. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Then let me earn one day at a time. For the first time since entering Blackwood Palace, Claire reached forward of her own free will, her fingertips moving toward the hand waiting patiently before her as the entire court watched in complete silence. Claire's fingertips rested lightly against Ethan's open hand before she gently placed her hand within his. It was a simple gesture, almost quiet enough to go unnoticed inside the vast throne room. Yet the moment their hands met, a warm silver radiance flowed between them like moonlight reflecting across still water. No violent burst of power shook the palace. No thunder rolled across the mountains. Instead, a peaceful light spread outward through the marble hall, touching every stone, every banner, and every face gathered beneath the crystal chandeliers. The moon seal beneath Claire's collarbone glowed with calm brilliance, while a matching silver crest slowly appeared over Ethan's heart beneath the fabric of his ceremonial coat. High Elder Alden closed his eyes, a grateful smile softening the lines of his weathered face. The covenant has been fulfilled, he whispered. Not because destiny demanded obedience, but because two hearts freely chose the same path. Around the throne room, the ancient crystal chandeliers reflected thousands of shimmering points of light until the polished marble floor resembled a quiet night sky filled with stars. Outside the palace walls, the great bells of Blackwood City began ringing one after another. Tower after tower answered across the valleys and snow-covered mountains, though no messenger had carried a command. Citizens paused in busy marketplaces. Farmers looked up from their fields. Children stopped their games to listen as the joyful sound echoed through the kingdom. Inside the palace, Ethan made no attempt to tighten his hold on Claire's hand. Instead, he kept his grip gentle, leaving her complete freedom to step away whenever she wished. Claire noticed that small act immediately, and her smile grew warmer. You truly understand, she said softly. Ethan met her eyes. Understanding is only the beginning. The rest will be learned one ordinary day at a time. Claire nodded. Then we begin with tomorrow. A quiet laugh, sincere and filled with relief, spread naturally through the gathered court. The fear, uncertainty, and pride that had shadowed the ceremony since morning had quietly disappeared, replaced by hope that felt both new and strangely familiar. Lord Cedric stepped forward first, placing one hand over his heart before bowing respectfully. Your Majesties, he said with genuine humility. Today I witnessed something greater than tradition. I witnessed wisdom choosing compassion. Lady Beatrice followed beside him, and I learned that the easiest judgments are often the most mistaken. Claire offered both of them the same gentle smile she had shown throughout the day. Then today has taught all of us something worth remembering. High Elder Alden carefully lifted the ancient silver crown from its crimson velvet cushion and approached the couple. Rather than placing it immediately upon Claire's head, he held it before her with both hands. Claire looked at the beautiful craftsmanship for a long moment before lightly touching its edge. A crown should never remind its wearer of power, she said quietly. It should remind them of responsibility. The elders exchanged emotional glances. Those exact words, preserved in the oldest teachings of the Lunar Sovereigns, had not been spoken aloud for centuries. Ethan smiled with quiet admiration. Then Blackwood has found exactly the leader it has been waiting for. Together they turned toward the great palace doors, sunlight pouring across the marble floor before them. They did not walk as strangers bound together by an arrangement neither had chosen. They walked side by side as two people who had freely chosen trust over assumption, humility over pride, and compassion over fear. Behind them, the court followed with renewed respect, while beyond the palace, An entire kingdom unknowingly celebrated the beginning of a new chapter. Long after the bells grew silent and the morning light faded into afternoon, people would remember that remarkable day not because an ancient prophecy had come true, nor because a forgotten covenant had returned, but because the strongest alpha in the kingdom discovered that true greatness begins the moment a person stops asking who deserves honor and starts becoming someone worthy of giving it. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts, like, share, subscribe, enable notifications, and join us for more unforgettable alpha romance stories ahead.